She yanked the heart monitor right off the little girl's chest like it was some toy. Then she said, "If she's really that disabled, she shouldn't be outside anyway." Neighbors gasped. The child's mother froze in horror, one hand reaching protectively across her daughter's fragile frame, while the other clutched a grocery bag still swinging from shock. And Karen? She just stood there in her HOA windbreaker, smug as a queen, waving the beeping medical device in the air like it was contraband. She had no idea who she was messing with. No idea that the man standing on the other side of the street, watching everything unfold in stunned silence, was the sheriff of the entire county. And more importantly, the little girl's father. It all started that Saturday morning. The neighborhood had been tense for weeks. HOA inspections, random fines, threats taped to front doors, a camera mysteriously mounted outside the Johnsons' porch. The buzz around the block was that something had shifted. And at the center of it all, Karen Holbrook, newly elected HOA president, mid-50s, blonde bob, a clipboard that never left her side and a walkie-talkie she used like she was dispatching SWAT. She had a habit of patrolling the sidewalks like a warden. One kid left a bike on the curb? $50 citation. Trash bin too close to the mailbox? $100. Too many guests over for a barbecue? She'd send a noise complaint and threaten eviction. Even though she didn't have that power. But what happened that morning wasn't just petty. It was monstrous. The Ramirez family had just moved in 3 weeks ago. A quiet, hard-working couple with a sweet little girl named Eva. She was 7, born with a rare cardiac condition that required constant monitoring. She had a heart monitor clipped to her chest 24/7. A delicate, hospital-issued device that alerted her parents the moment her heart rate dipped or spiked. She wasn't allowed to run or play rough. But that didn't stop her from trying to be a normal kid. That Saturday, Eva's mom took her for a gentle walk to the corner mailbox. The sun was out. The birds were chirping. It was the first time Eva had smiled in days. Until Karen stormed out from behind a hedge like she'd been waiting. "Stop right there," she barked, eyes locking onto the blinking device strapped to Eva's chest. "What is that?" Her mom explained calmly that it was a medical device. That Eva had a condition. That their doctors insisted she needed to wear it constantly. But Karen didn't hear a word. Or maybe she just didn't care. She leaned in, grabbed it with 2 fingers like it was a lit cigarette, and yanked it, hard. Eva screamed. And the monitor went dead. Her mother's voice cracked as she pleaded, trying to snatch it back. Karen shoved her away with an elbow and hissed, "You people think you can bring whatever junk you want into my neighborhood?" That's when the sheriff, who just pulled into his driveway across the street, heard the scream. And saw it all. His badge was still in his glove box. He was off duty. Just another dad in jeans and boots. But when he saw his daughter, his baby girl, clutching her chest, crying in pain, something inside him snapped. He didn't even shut the car door. 3 weeks before that awful morning, the Ramirez family rolled into the neighborhood in a dusty U-Haul. They weren't flashy. They didn't make noise. They just wanted safety, stability, and peace. Carlos Ramirez had served 20 years in the Marines before becoming county sheriff. A man of quiet discipline, sharp instincts, and an even sharper sense of justice. His wife, Marisol, was a former trauma nurse. She'd given up her hospital work when their daughter was diagnosed with congenital heart block. The girl needed round-the-clock care, and Marisol? She never once complained. They chose Willow Glen Estates because it promised tranquility. Tree-lined streets. Strict safety regulations. A quiet cul-de-sac where Eva might, for once, feel like a normal child. The realtor had spoken so highly of the HOA. "We keep things pristine here," she said. "Everyone follows the rules. It's paradise for families." But no one warned them about Karen Holbrook. The day after they moved in, Karen was on their porch. Not with cookies. Not with a welcome note. With a clipboard. "There are moving blankets on the lawn," she snapped. Carlos blinked. We're still unloading. Rules say the grass must be clear by 5 p.m. Karen barked. Page 12, paragraph 3. You should have read the handbook. It was the first of many encounters. Marisol caught her snapping photos of their recycling bins. Carlos found chalk marks near his driveway, Karen's notorious violation tagging. Once, Eva dropped a juice pouch on the sidewalk, and before Marisol could pick it up, Karen was already scribbling something into her notebook. It felt like being hunted. And Eva, she noticed. The little girl with chestnut curls and wide, wondering eyes had lived more inside hospital walls than playgrounds. Her condition was delicate. A normal child's heartbeat could speed up or slow down safely. Eva's couldn't. Any fluctuation could be fatal. That's why the monitor was essential. It wasn't some accessory. It was her lifeline. The device linked wirelessly to Marisol's phone. Every vibration, every alert, meant something. It buzzed one night at 2:17 a.m. Carlos was first to reach her room. Eva was sweating. Her heart was racing. They rushed her to the ER in their pajamas. The doctors said, if that monitor wasn't on, she might not have made it. Carlos never forgot those words. He'd spent years in uniform. Had seen war. Chaos. Broken systems. But nothing ever shook him like the sight of his daughter hooked up to machines, too weak to lift her hand. That was the night he promised Marisol. We're gonna make sure she gets the life she deserves. And for a moment, Willow Glen seemed like the answer. Eva loved the new house. The backyard had a garden full of butterflies. Neighbors waved kindly, at first. But Karen lingered. Watching. Always watching. One morning, Marisol caught her inspecting Eva's medical equipment near the porch. What are you doing? Marisol asked, stepping out. Karen didn't flinch. This thing has a blinking light. That's visual pollution. Technically, that's against HOA visibility standards. It's a heart monitor, Marisol said. It keeps my daughter alive. Karen folded her arms. I don't make exceptions. If she needs that much help, maybe she shouldn't be walking around the neighborhood. That was 2 days before it happened. Marisol wanted to file a complaint. Carlos said to wait. He wanted to handle things calmly, officially. But when Karen snatched that monitor off his daughter's chest, right there on the sidewalk, all bets were off. The second that monitor hit the ground, the sound was unmistakable. Crack. Eva let out a scream that stopped traffic. Marisol dropped to her knees, scooping her daughter into her arms, eyes wide with panic. The beeping had stopped. The light had gone dark. And Karen? Karen stood there smug, arms crossed over her HOA windbreaker, tapping her foot like she was the victim. I told you people, she snapped. No blinking devices. No disturbances. This is a peaceful community. You think you're special? You think rules don't apply to you? Carlos had barely shut his car door before he was sprinting across the street. He didn't need his badge. He didn't need his gun. All he needed was one look at Eva's pale face. And suddenly, 20 years of training came roaring back. Step away from my daughter, he boomed. Karen turned startled. Her eyes narrowed when she recognized him. Oh, you, she muttered. I should have known. The one with the military decals and the oversized truck. Carlos didn't blink. Did you touch her? He asked, voice low, deadly calm. Karen shrugged. She was carrying an unauthorized device. That's a code violation. Page 16 of the HOA handbook. He held up a finger. One more word, he warned, and you're going to find out what real violations look like. Marisol's hands were shaking. She was dialing 911, trying to explain through tears that the monitor was broken and Eva's condition was unstable. Eva's breathing grew shallow. Her lips turned faintly blue. Carlos knelt beside her, whispering words of comfort, but his eyes never left Karen. And still, Karen didn't back down. Instead, she turned to the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered. You all saw it! That thing was flashing! It could be a camera, for all we know. I don't want my family recorded every time I walk my dog. One man stepped forward, Mr. Dugan, from 2 doors down. That's a child with a medical device, Karen. You went too far. She's faking it, Karen shouted, pointing at Eva. No one that's sick should be out walking around. And you, she said, jabbing a finger toward Marisol. You're endangering the whole community. What if that thing sends out signals? What if it interferes with security systems? Someone gasped. Another neighbor muttered. This woman's lost her mind. Carlos rose to his full height. 6'3". Broad shoulders. And a presence that made grown men sit straighter. She is my daughter, he said quietly. And that device you just destroyed is what keeps her alive. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You people and your victim cards. The sound of sirens cut her off. 2 cruisers pulled up in seconds. Carlos didn't say a word. He just stepped aside, scooped Eva into his arms, and walked straight to the paramedics. Marisol followed, still clutching the shattered heart monitor. Karen looked around, suddenly unsure. Her confidence wavered when one of the responding officers stepped out of the car and recognized Carlos. Sheriff? Carlos nodded grimly. Karen's jaw dropped. You're the county sheriff? The officer turned toward Karen. Ma'am, we're going to need a statement. Now. But I didn't do anything, Karen snapped. I was just enforcing HOA rules. The officer pulled out his notepad. Did you physically remove an electronic device from a child's body? Karen hesitated. I didn't know it was attached like that. I thought it was some kind of gadget. So you didn't ask? He pressed. You didn't get permission from the parents? You didn't confirm anything before laying hands on a minor? She didn't look sick, Karen muttered weakly. That was the moment it hit her. She wasn't going to talk her way out of this one. Because this time, she hadn't just messed with flowers or lawn paint or trash bins. She'd touched a child. A disabled child. And the man who just carried that little girl into the ambulance? He was the highest law enforcement official in the county. Karen's mouth opened to protest. But the words never came. Karen had spent her entire HOA reign handing out punishments. But this time? The rules weren't hers. And the consequences were very real. Back at the scene, the crowd of neighbors remained still, some murmuring under their breath, others filming quietly with phones pointed at Karen. The officer interviewing her stepped aside to speak with his partner. Carlos had returned from the ambulance, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. Marisol sat in the back seat of the patrol car, holding Eva close as EMTs worked to get a pulse reading. The broken monitor lay on the seat beside her, useless. One officer turned to Carlos. We've contacted dispatch. Paramedics say she's stable for now, but she needs that monitor replaced ASAP. Carlos nodded. He'd already called the hospital. They were prepping a new unit for emergency pickup. Karen, meanwhile, tried to slither her way out. I didn't know she was your daughter, she said, her voice suddenly thinner, more high-pitched. If someone had just told me earlier, I wouldn't have. Carlos looked her dead in the eye. That's the problem. You think respect is earned based on who someone is. On their status. Their badge. Their skin. Their accent. Their condition. Karen blinked. I was just doing my job as HOA president. He stepped closer. You were never elected to be a judge, jury, and executioner. He pulled something from his back pocket. A wallet. Inside it, his badge. He held it up to her face. County Sheriff, Carlos Ramirez. Karen's breath caught in her throat. You're him? She whispered. He didn't blink. I've worked with the governor. Handled cross-county criminal networks. Mediated hostage crises. And today? I had to watch a self-appointed neighborhood watchdog rip a lifeline off my child's chest. Her eyes darted toward the police cruiser. Toward the other officers now watching in silence. Carlos's voice dropped low. Do you understand what you just did? Karen's lips trembled. It was a misunderstanding. I thought. You assaulted a minor. Disabled. Medically vulnerable. On public property. In front of multiple witnesses. She stammered. I didn't mean to. But you did. His voice sharpened. And you've been harassing my wife. Taking photos of my house. Issuing fake citations. Overstepping your role. Pretending to be something you're not. I have rights. She snapped suddenly, trying to recover. You can't just threaten me because you're a cop. I'll get a lawyer. Carlos tilted his head. This isn't about threats. It's about accountability. You abuse your power, and now you'll face actual authority. Karen's face flushed. But this is all just blown out of proportion. She's fine. That kid. Carlos stepped in so close she flinched. You're done, Karen. He turned to the officers. I want this documented. Every witness. Every video. Every word she said. I'll file the formal charges myself. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She backed up slowly, bumping into the edge of a planter. The neighborhood that once feared her was watching her unravel. Carlos looked over his shoulder. Marisol and Eva are heading to the hospital. I'll meet them there. You know where to find me for the paperwork. The senior officer nodded. Already started. Carlos took one last look at Karen. She didn't look like a president anymore. She didn't even look like a neighbor. She looked small. Cornered. Powerless. He got in his truck and drove off, slowly, past the crowd, past the house they had tried so hard to make into a home. But as he turned the corner, something in the rearview mirror caught his eye. Karen, still standing there, surrounded by silence. No one came to defend her. Not one neighbor. By the following Monday, Karen Holbrook was no longer HOA president. An emergency board meeting was called that Sunday night, hosted in Mr. Dugan's garage, packed with more neighbors than anyone had seen in years. Someone brought cupcakes. Another set up a live stream for those who couldn't attend. Karen wasn't invited. Her actions had already gone viral. Multiple neighbors posted the incident on social media. The footage, Karen grabbing the heart monitor, Eva's scream, the stunned silence, spread like wildfire. The local paper ran the headline. HOA president assaults disabled child, county sheriff steps in. By Tuesday, Karen's face was all over the news. And the sheriff's office had filed official charges. Assault on a minor. Destruction of medical property. Harassment. The legal process would take weeks, but one thing was already certain. Karen had lost her grip. The board voted unanimously to remove her from office. HOA members demanded an audit of every citation she'd issued. Turns out she'd racked up nearly $12,000 in bogus fines over the past year. Carlos stayed quiet through it all. No interviews. No press conferences. Just focus on his daughter's recovery. Eva spent 2 nights in the hospital. The broken monitor had caused a delay in detecting her heart arrhythmia. It took hours to stabilize her heartbeat again. But she pulled through, brave, smiling, and asking for ice cream by the second morning. Marisol didn't leave her side. And when they finally returned home, neighbors lined the sidewalk. With cards. Stuffed animals. Balloons. Even the Johnson twins, who'd once been fined for sidewalk chalk, brought a hand-drawn poster that read, "We love you, Eva." One woman from 3 streets over approached Marisol with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry I never said anything. Karen scared all of us. But you? You stood up. You protected your family." Carlos thanked them all. Quietly. Gratefully. But justice wasn't done just yet. At the county courthouse, Karen showed up with a new haircut, a new lawyer, and a whole lot of excuses. She didn't mean harm. She thought it was a camera. She was only protecting the neighborhood. But the judge didn't buy it. Especially not after watching the full video. Especially not after seeing Eva's medical records and the doctor's sworn affidavit on the importance of the monitor. The judge's ruling? Community service. Formal probation. And a public letter of apology to the Ramirez family, published in the HOA newsletter. Karen tried to push back. The judge stared her down. You humiliated a child. Endangered her health. Ignored every ounce of common sense and decency. And you did it in the name of control. You will take responsibility. And so she did. 1 month later, the HOA newsletter landed on every porch. Inside was a letter, signed and sealed, where Karen admitted fault, expressed regret, and formally resigned from the HOA for good. Neighbors read it over coffee. Some clipped it out and pinned it to their fridge. Others just smiled and said, "Finally!" Eva's monitor beeped softly. Not an alarm, just the usual rhythm. Gentle, consistent. Like a heartbeat finally at peace. She was back home. Back in her room, curled up with her stuffed bunny, sunlight spilling through the window. Carlos stood in the doorway, watching her with a look only a father could understand. He hadn't said much since the trial. Didn't brag. Didn't celebrate. He just held his daughter a little tighter each night. And every morning before leaving for work, he double-checked her monitor. Twice. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and fireflies began their slow waltz across the lawn, Carlos and Marisol sat on the porch. Neighbors passed by with friendly nods, many stopping to say hello. No tension. No suspicion. Just peace. Real peace. Not the kind forced by rules or HOA citations, but the kind built on respect, empathy, and quiet strength. Marisol leaned into his shoulder. She smiled today, she whispered. At the garden. She pointed at a butterfly and said it looked like justice with wings. Carlos chuckled. That sounds like her. A few days later, the mailbox held something unexpected. A hand-drawn card from the Johnson twins. Inside, in uneven crayon letters, it said, Eva is a hero. So are you. Carlos kept it in his office, right beside his badge. And Karen? No one heard much from her again. She moved to another neighborhood. One without an HOA. Rumor had it, she tried to start a garden club. It didn't last long. But her name lived on. Not in anger. In memory. As a reminder of what happens when power forgets compassion. And what happens when the right people stand up. Because Carlos didn't just defend his daughter. He reminded a neighborhood what decency looked like. He didn't do it with a badge. He did it as a father. And Eva? She didn't need revenge. She just wanted her garden, her books, and her bunny. But from that day on, whenever she walked past the mailbox, monitor blinking gently, people waved, smiled, stepped aside. Not out of fear, but out of love. And Carlos? Every time he watched her walk with her mother, tiny hand wrapped around Marisol's, he whispered the same word to himself. Safe. Because in the end, that's all justice really means.